I love speaking in front of a microphone. It makes me feel important. You can tell how lacking that is in my life, but a little thing like a microphone could make a difference. Power. Welcome to Writers and Books. We went from having nobody up here to having almost a room full. It's wonderful. I was so pleased to see everybody walking in all at once. I could hear the party you were having downstairs without me, but I'm glad you decided to bring it up here. We have all been eagerly anticipating this reading. It was rescheduled, and thankfully we were able to find a date that Reenah and Sally and I could all be available. It wasn't my schedule that was the problem, because I'm not as busy as they are, but they have a lot going on. So thankfully they found this time. I think it's very appropriate that it's right before Thanksgiving, because I'm very thankful for both of them. They may not know how much of an influence they've had on me, and I want both of them to know that I appreciate you very, very much. Your power as women, your role modeling what it's like to be strong and tell the truth and reach down deep and pull it out and give it to people is amazing, and it has helped me, so thank you both for that. So when I was thinking about who to have together on this reading, I thought this would be a perfect pair. Personalities are a little different, but they both are passionate women, strong voices. They have a lot to say about justice and about things that don't work right in the world and how to make things better. And they have a lot to say about how people get along with each other and all of that good stuff. And so they not only have a strong message, but they're also like master class writers. So we've got the artistic element, and we have the content element together, and so we are in for a ride tonight, I will tell you. I cannot wait. So I need to quit talking. I did want to say that if you are a member of Writers and Books, you will now be getting this. This replaces our catalog, but it's a handy-dandy little thing that says everything that's going on in the world of Writers and Books. Lots of new stuff coming, lots of old stuff still here. Fantastic teachers. I think Reenah and Sally are both teaching or have taught here in the past. Top quality people teaching. This one's just about done. We're about ready for another one, which is coming out very soon. But there is a material memoir masterclass by Gail Hosking. If any of you were here 2 weeks ago and heard her read, you know that this is somebody that you want to pay attention to. If you have any interest in writing memoir, you want to come to this class. So that's Saturday, December the 7th, and that's still open. So if you're not a member, you can take care of that tonight, and we'll get this next one. I'm excited, yes. Okay. So we're going to start with Sally Bittner Bonn tonight. I've known Sally probably as long as I've been coming to Writers and Books, which has got to be, wow, almost 30 years now. Is that possible? Were you here 30 years ago? I can't believe I was here 30 years ago. Maybe more like 20. Yeah, more like 20. Sally has always been a person with her own unique voice and her own sense of how things ought to be. And she has just grown and developed that more and more as she is, her life has gone on, and she got married and has a son and all that good stuff. Hi, son. I see you and Chris Fanning are both wearing green hats tonight. I was wondering if maybe that, I didn't get the message, I don't know. She has been featured in Mothers Always Right, W-R-I-T-E, and Mothers Are Always Right, also in the Big Brick Review, and Listen to Your Mother, Rochester. She served as co-producer for 2 years. She is the director of youth education at Writers and Books. Any of the youth here have done classes with her, or are you friends of Oscar or the family? Or? Okay, friends of Oscar, we're going to get a group. And is working on a memoir about raising her son, who creates his own Lego characters. Got to talk to you about that. Knows more about Greek and Norse mythology than she ever will, although you're trying to teach her really hard, right? Is she a slow learner?
With Norse mythology, definitely.
Okay. She occasionally blogs about disability awareness, and her super cool family, yes they are, at oscargo.org. Please welcome the fantastic and lovely Sally Bittner Bonn.
Thank you so much, Wanda. I'm going to start by pulling a Chris Fanning and take a picture of you guys. This is just like an amazing group of people here tonight.
Smile.
You're still in it. How am I gonna? You guys get your own. I can't make my lens get wide enough. And I'm scared that I'm going to spill 2 glasses of water, so I'm going to put Reenah's over there. Or drink both. That could happen too. So first of all, just a huge thank you to Wanda for inviting me here tonight, and to Writers and Books, my home away from home. I'm here a lot, but have not been behind this microphone in a long time, so that's pretty exciting. And a huge thank you to Reenah. I'm just thrilled to be sharing a reading with her tonight. She's one of the first teaching artists and writers I met when I moved back to Rochester, and I've been inspired by her since. And I just deeply admire her work and what she does for the arts community here in Rochester. So you'll hear some of that for sure tonight, and if you're not familiar with Reenah, follow her after tonight, please. I have 2 essays tonight that I'm going to share. The first one is short, the second one is long, so get settled in, get prepared. So the first one is actually kind of a mishmash of some Facebook posts I wrote during the month of August. August was SMA Awareness Month, which you'll learn more about what SMA is later, but ultimately I used it as an opportunity to do a little bit of writing about disability awareness, and I had several different posts that I've kind of mashed together into one short piece. So I'm calling it Disability Mashup, or Open Call for the Army of Accomplices, because that's what we need to get more voices out there around disability awareness. Oscar does not wish he could walk. He never has, in fact. Oscar's disability is part of who he is. It cannot be separated from him. Oscar says, "You shouldn't feel sorry for me because I'm disabled. It's who I am. It's part of me. I'm just a kid like any other kid." People say things to people in wheelchairs that they don't say to people who don't use wheelchairs. It can be weird. People like to ask Oscar if he has a license, or tell him that he's going to get a speeding ticket. It was a little bit cute at age 4, not so much at age 11. Oscar, David, and I are working on coming up with some comebacks that will hopefully make people more aware, and hopefully not come off as rude. But honestly, this kid hears so many weird things, and the same ones again and again, it's hard sometimes to address some of these and not sound rude. For example, we were in a parking lot recently in the rain, and Oscar was zooming into the van. A passerby said, "Wow, look how fast." I thought, wouldn't you be running if you didn't have an umbrella? And then, and this is one he gets all the time, "You really know how to maneuver that well." The thing is, when Oscar was just barely 3, before he had his own power chair, we were able to borrow one for 2 weeks to try it out. At age 3, he learned how to drive this chair in about 2 days. Mobility is mobility, whether it's walking, using a manual wheelchair, a scooter, or driving a power chair. So I replied to her, "Yup, just as well as you and I can walk." She laughed, a slightly uncomfortable laugh. I get that someone unfamiliar with people in wheelchairs wants to relate in some way, and this seems to be an easy go-to. But would you ever say to an ambulatory 11-year-old, "Wow, you're really good at walking"? Oscar and or our whole family often gets, "I'll pray for you." Oscar's comeback for that is, "Yes, please pray that I don't get a lot of homework." People in wheelchairs don't need more prayers than people who walk. Life in a wheelchair is not unfortunate. Honestly, I'd like to say to people who say that, and I'll pray that you learn not to make assumptions about other people's lives just by looking at them. Things we have to think about every time we leave the house, especially going to new places. Will there be accessible parking? Will it be van accessible? Are all the spots already taken? Where are the curb cuts? Are there even curb cuts? Will there be muddy, gravelly, uneven, or otherwise challenging or inaccessible terrain? Is the entrance to where we are going accessible? Do we need to bring one or more of our portable ramps, which are heavy and awkward to wield, but can allow access if there are only a couple of steps? If we can get inside, is the whole place accessible? Are there additional interior steps? Are furnishings placed at a reasonable distance from one another to allow a wheelchair easy access through? Will it be super crowded and therefore difficult to maneuver? How much extra time do we need to allow for strapping Oscar and his chair in with 5 buckles to secure him in our van? How much extra time do we need to allow for a slow lift or a busy elevator? Do we need to cover Oscar's joystick because of rain or snow? Has snow been adequately cleared for a wheelchair? Is there an accessible bathroom? If the bathroom is labeled accessible, and even if it is ADA approved, is it actually accessible? And if Oscar and I are going somewhere together, just the two of us, will there be a gender-neutral bathroom? There is so much mental energy involved just to leave the house, people. I am so much better a person for the presence of disability in my life. Much of that is owed, of course, to the bright light our Oscar is. The day he got his first power chair at the age of 3 remains one of the happiest days of my life, because he finally had the independence that other kids his age had for some time. We're loud and proud here in this family. I have learned that walking is definitely not the most important thing I can do, and that one can have a completely fulfilling and joy-filled life and never walk. I have learned how to step out of my comfort zone and ask for help. I have learned how to step out of my comfort zone to tell complete strangers they are out of line and parking in the yellow lines or the accessible parking just for 5 minutes. I have learned that doctors and administrators are just people too, and at times I know more than they do. I have learned when to listen to them and when to question them, and when to be silent and do the opposite of what they suggest. I have learned to pick what really matters to me in life and stick with it, and to forgive myself when I am too tired to stick with it. I have learned that my kid knows more than I do about living with disability, and sometimes I have to backpedal and say, I'm sorry, you are right. Welcome. I should also say that we're videotaping tonight because my mom is not here because she is sick, and she's so sad to not be here. So everybody say hi to my mom. All right, that was the short essay. Now I've got a long essay. This is something I've been working on a long time that has not yet seen the light of day, so you guys are the first. Although I did read it to Oscar a week or so ago, and he approved, which was pretty cool. Since I write a whole lot about him, it means a lot to be able to share this writing with him, a lot of which I haven't done so far, as he's slowly growing and maturing, and my writing is shifting and changing. So it's a gift to be able to share it all with you tonight, with Oscar in the audience. And this has been through a few different versions, so this may be a version that it's passing through. I don't know, we'll see. It's called On the Meaning of Cure. Thank you all for being here tonight, by the way. I'm just so moved seeing so many people tonight several of whom I haven't seen in a while, and just my heart is full, so thank you all. On the meaning of cure. The large general session conference room was packed with parents craning their necks toward the researchers. As soon as the floor opened for questions, several hands shot into the air. What is the timeline? When will a drug be available? Will it be in time to help my type 1 baby? This was the culminating session of the 3-day Families of SMA conference, our first. It was 2010, and David and I had flown to from Rochester, New York to California with my mom and Oscar, our 20-month-old child. We hadn't known what to expect, but this session wasn't what we were looking for. Oscar had been diagnosed with type 2 SMA, or spinal muscular atrophy, at the age of 14 months. That was when we learned he would never crawl or walk. He would need to use a power wheelchair for the rest of his life. Receiving the diagnosis had been devastating, but our soft-spoken pediatrician had said, Oscar is 3% SMA and 97% regular boy. And we knew it to be true. He was our same boy we had loved with all our hearts since the day he was born. We came to this conference to learn more about SMA and to meet other families affected by SMA. But we did not come to this conference to seek advances in science that would fix our son. We knew there was research out there, that scientists were working on drugs, but nothing was close to being ready for FDA approval. And that was not where our minds were focused. Oscar's SMA, type 2, is significantly less severe than type 1. The raised hands of type 1 parents in that researcher session would never get a magic pill. Their babies would likely die before any of these drugs made it to phase 3 clinical trials, let alone FDA approval. They clearly were seeking the science. The desperation was difficult to witness. We walked out of the room and vowed never to attend that culminating researcher session again. The day before, I had watched a father pull his teenage daughter out of the hotel pool, hands under her armpits. Her body from the shoulders down dangled limp from his strong hands as he carried her 15 paces to the hot tub, lowered her in, where she became another head bobbing above the water again, just like all the other heads. I saw my future flash before me in that moment, harrowing to the person I was then with disability so new in my life, but also reassuring at what was possible. One family told us we looked good for our first conference. We weren't having a breakdown, if that's what they meant. Though I did feel like a deer in the headlights at this conference, set down rather suddenly amongst so many wheelchairs. The conference was amazing in many ways. Medical information, access to experts, meeting so many other families. But we felt it had been lacking in the how to cope department. There was nothing directly addressing the emotional side of raising a child with SMA. So, 2 years later, we proposed to lead a conference session for parents about using creativity to deal with complex emotions. The Families of SMA organization accepted our proposal, and off we went to Minneapolis this time. We were now 2.5 years past diagnosis. In that time, we had learned so much about living with this rare condition. As soon as our taxi pulled up to the hotel, I teared up. I was so relieved that through those doors were people I could relate to in a way I could not relate to anyone back home. As I was checking us in, Oscar met a young woman in a power wheelchair. Our shy at the time little guy made a new friend whom he followed around all weekend. Our 3-year-old in his new power chair racing this woman in her early 20s. She spent a day at the Mall of America and came back from Build-A-Bear with a bear named Mr. Hot Wheels for Oscar. Even now, at age 11, he still sleeps with that bear.
It's true.
The conference became a yearly tradition, an important part of our June. We felt like we lived on an island, isolated by SMA, navigating accessibility issues and respiratory equipment, the daily woes and joys of raising our unique little guy, with no one else around who really got it. At conference, everyone got it. At home, I could spot Oscar in an instant in any situation. He was the kid attached to the wheels. At conference, there were so many wheels that you couldn't pick your own kid out of a crowd, which came to be a relief. David came to liken the conference to going to the mainland. As social media started to become more pervasive, SMA Facebook groups started up. I could now connect virtually to the mainland throughout the year. Families posted photos of kids getting new power chairs, videos of kids swimming independently, stories of successful spinal fusion surgery, tales of friends finding creative ways to be inclusive, or photos from overnight MDA camp. They posted links to medical news, research, upcoming clinical trials, links to fundraisers with titles containing words like cure or hope. People posted questions about sleep, because in most cases, folks with SMA need support rolling over in the night, and all us parents are tired and always looking for new ideas. Some lamented their child's Christmas list, which included requests like being able to walk, or wrote about a child's prayers to God to be different, suggesting that perhaps someday those prayers would be answered by a cure. These posts made me feel nauseous. I didn't want to create a framework of the world for my son where there existed a supreme spirit with the power to make my son different from who he is, or worse, that might want my child to be different. Oscar didn't have that desire to be other. He had been comfortable in his skin from the beginning, and I didn't want anything to jeopardize that. When Oscar was 3, I found online a thick black leather bracelet with a silver plate on it that said, Cure SMA. I loved the sturdiness of the leather and the affiliation with the SMA community, but I couldn't wear something on my body that said Cure SMA. To me, this suggested my child should be different than who he is. When Oscar was older and learned more about SMA and the community, if he wanted to wear something that said Cure SMA or wanted to raise money in the name of researching a cure, I'd support him 100%. But as his parent, I couldn't do that without him. There would be no black leather band for me. A couple years later, I found a brown leather band through a well-known family foundation in the SMA community. The silver plate was imprinted with their motto, Never Give Up. I bought it promptly and have worn it every day since. One summer morning, when Oscar was 5, I learned that the organization Families of SMA had changed their name to Cure SMA. I was shaking. I was so upset. Oscar, as far as we knew, didn't know the word cure, and we didn't want him to. Now, at the next conference, he would definitely learn the word in relationship to himself. The idea of Cure SMA to me was akin to erasing part of my son. This seemed unfair in a world where wheelchair users can often feel invisible, in a world that often contains steps without ramps, a world where basic accommodations like tables, door handles, bathroom size are often not thought through, and a world where people look past the disabled as if they weren't even there. The name change implied eliminating SMA from the world. SMA is part of my son's genetic code. What kind of message would it be to send to any human being, but especially my 5-year-old child? I wrote a letter to the organization on behalf of our family, letting them know that we could not respect the name in terms of how it relates to the people the organization actually serves. The board president spent an hour on the phone with us, explaining how important it was to widen the circle, to be able to bring donors into the organization on a larger scale. I got it. To an outsider, what does families of SMA mean? But as soon as you put the word cure in front of SMA, it becomes obvious it is a medical condition, and it becomes more likely to garner notable donations. SMA had been identified by the National Institutes for Health and the National Institute for Neurological Disorders and Stroke as #1 on a long list of neurological disorders for research and development of a possible treatment or cure. The process for FDA approval of a drug is long and arduous, involves many stages and steps over the course of many years, and costs millions upon millions of dollars. The majority of drugs never pass enough tests to make it to human clinical trials, let alone FDA approval. Yet here was SMA at the top of the pile for research. We listened on the periphery year after year as more drugs were added to the pipeline, as some made it further and further along. Early clinical trials were showing positive results, like a 2-year-old who could first hold a standing position when placed, then push herself to stand, then edge along a table with some tentative steps. As time went on, more and more people we knew were part of this one particular trial and were seeing improvements. After all I had learned about the process, I didn't expect this drug to make it through to FDA approval, but it kept making its way closer until finally it looked like it could happen. Oscar didn't hesitate when I told him about the drug. I don't want it. I like myself the way I am. It was a proud mom moment for sure. In a world that regularly asks, what's wrong with you or what happened to you? Our son in the wheelchair was fully secure in who he was. On December 23, 2016, the FDA approved the drug Spinraza for all ages and types of SMA. The drug would be administered through lumbar puncture, an injection into the spinal fluid. There would be 4 loading doses over the course of 2 months, then maintenance doses every 4 months after that, indefinitely. The results from the clinical trials showed measurable gains in a large percentage of patients. The younger the child started dosing, the greater the gains. SMA is the absence of the SMN1 gene, survival motor neuron, which makes the SMN protein that is responsible for about 80% of voluntary movement in the body. There's a backup gene, the SMN2 gene, but it doesn't do as good of a job producing SMN protein. So with SMA, motor neurons begin to die off and muscle groups begin to atrophy. Spinraza makes the backup SMN2 gene work better and harder to create more complete SMN protein, which in turn stimulates more motor neurons, keeping them alive and functioning. The younger the patient at the time of intervention, the more motor neurons that are still living, so the more significant the effects. Babies, even with type 1, might gain enough strength to eventually be able to walk. Older kids, like Oscar, might see an increase in what they can do with their arms and hands. Lung function was likely to improve in all age groups, which is significant because the greatest danger people with SMA face is respiratory complication. This was not a cure. Spinraza would not end SMA. But for type 1 babies, it indeed was a miracle drug. And for older patients, it could help maintain and possibly build some strength. It could enrich what mobility people with SMA did have. It was a remarkable breakthrough in the world of science and medicine. My Facebook feed exploded with questions about insurance approval, appointments, and eventually photos from first injections. There was a general feeling of great excitement, relief, anticipation. I took in each celebration as it happened, but I kept the feeling at arm's length as I tried to figure out where our son fit into this picture. We hadn't been looking for a treatment, but this drug might help Oscar, might prevent further deterioration of his muscles. We leaned in, listened, read. We went back to the conference, even attended the researcher panel we had sworn we'd never return to. But we simply found celebration, not a lot of helpful new information. There were lots of researchers ready to answer specific questions, but we didn't know what our specific questions were. On the last day of this conference in 2017, David and I sat with Stevie Hopkins while he ate lunch. As always, Stevie was wearing a wheelchair heart t-shirt, the universal symbol for the wheelchair that you see in parking spaces and on bathroom doors, except the wheel, instead of being round, forms the shape of a heart. We first met Stevie at the conference the year Oscar was 3. There, among the exhibitors, was a colorful table piled with t-shirts all bearing the wheelchair heart symbol. And there was Stevie, spreading the message of acceptance through his company, 3E Love, embrace, educate, empower, by selling wheelchair heart goods to people all over the world. Tiny Oscar and Stevie took a liking to one another. Wear your heart on your sleeve is the tagline for the company, and I do. We all wear our 3E Love gear. That symbol got inside of me and changed me. It gave me permission to have pride in the wheelchair, pride for disability. I had slowly, tentatively been making my way there, but this solidified it. So there we were, 5 years later, sitting with Stevie in the bright, high-ceilinged atrium of the hotel in Florida this time, just a handful of feet away from the 3E Love table, when Stevie asked if Oscar was on Spinraza. We told him about Oscar's reaction, about liking himself the way he is, and Stevie smiled with admiration. "How's his scoliosis?" Stevie asked. "Remarkably, he doesn't have any." That would be reason enough for me to get it. If you can prolong spinal fusion, that would be great. That was not fun for me. Most people with SMA have significant scoliosis that compresses the already compromised respiratory system and at some point needs spinal fusion, which is a major and complicated surgery. "Sure, that makes sense," David said. "We didn't want to jump on it as soon as it was approved, being a new treatment. We wanted to wait and see what would happen." My dad always said, "Don't be the first and don't be the last," which is advice I've always tried to follow. "I think I'll probably do it. If it can help me preserve the use of my hands, that would be great," said Stevie. Soon after we got home, I spoke with Oscar's pediatrician about our possible interest in Spinraza. She said the data looked good. And then, without me saying a word, she brought up Oscar's sensitivity and fear around all things medical. She knew that at age 3, he had spent 9 traumatic days in the pediatric intensive care unit with pneumonia, and how anxious he still gets around any kind of medical intervention. She said if we moved forward with this treatment, she would work with us on an approach that would take care of Oscar emotionally, utilizing child life specialists, the people who had brought Oscar toys when he was in the hospital, and treading easy in a way that would allow Oscar to feel as safe as possible. One day, I mentioned to Oscar that I had seen a video on Facebook of a girl we knew who, after starting Spinraza, could lift her arms straight over her head. She could sidle her wheelchair up to a large sheet of paper hanging on a wall and draw, holding her arm at a distance away from her body to make contact with the paper. I thought Oscar, quite the artist himself, might appreciate this story. But I talked for too long, until he burst into tears and said, "I don't know why you're telling me this. It's like you think I should get it, but I don't want it, and I'm not getting it. I don't want to talk about it." He zoomed down the hall, and I started to follow. "I'm so sorry. I'm not trying to upset you. I was at a loss. Do you want a hug?" "Leave me alone. Go out of here." He slammed his bedroom door with his chair. I wanted to be on the other side of that door, to hold him and his pain, his fear, his anger. I wanted to know what the big reaction was about. Was he simply scared of the needle? Was his utter panic about Spinraza about his fear of medical intervention? Or was it something larger? He liked himself the way he was. What if he thought I didn't? What if he thought David and I wanted him to become someone other than who he was? I vowed to myself not to bring it up again for some time, and I stuck to that, even though it gnawed at me. Even though I was desperate to tell him one more story I saw on Facebook or ask him one more question, like a scab begging to be picked at. We told Oscar we'd be having a phone call with Crawford, as Oscar likes to call his neurologist from Johns Hopkins, casually omitting the doctor. He said, "You mean we have to humor them and pretend we're interested and then not get the medicine?" David and I looked at each other wide-eyed, the corners of our mouths twitching upward. "We'll see, bud. We'll see." Dr. Crawford told us, "I'm all in. The time is now." David and I found moments late at night to have whispered conversations in the kitchen. Sound travels easily through our open floor plan ranch house, and we didn't want to run the risk of Oscar overhearing us. We'd reached the point where we knew we had to do this. Spinraza. But how? And when? How would we protect our child? There was no definitive moment of making a decision. There was simply the time when we weren't sure if we would pursue this, and without fully realizing it, we crossed over and knew we had to. I waited several weeks and broached the subject with Oscar again. I told him about a friend from the conference, a girl who is a few years older than he, who can now adjust her own covers in bed in the middle of the night. Before, she had to call her parents in 3 to 4 times per night to help her roll, like Oscar, who often called more. Now she only calls once in the night. I thought this would be exciting to him. Instead, he burst into tears. "All you ever talk about is Spinraza. It's like you want me to get it in 3 days or 5 days. I'm not getting it when I'm 8 or 9 or probably even 10. If I get it, I'll be older, maybe 13. He zoomed off into his room and slammed the door again. My heart crumbled. Yet he said maybe 13. Before it was never. Maybe this was progress. Despite the meltdowns, David and I found ways to insert Spinraza into conversations, figuring the more it came up, the more he would get used to the idea, and the less traumatic, hopefully, it would be each time. We warned him that at upcoming appointments, his doctors would bring it up. He groaned in acknowledgement. I let him know that a college student, also with type 2 SMA, who he looked up to and who had just recently started Spinraza, was willing to FaceTime with him about it. He took in the information, didn't respond, but also didn't cry or protest. We involved one of his physical therapists, who brought up the subject and gave him homework to think about the way the drug might be able to help him. He admitted if it were an oral medication, it would be a no-brainer, then backpedaled. Well, not a no-brainer, but, well, I don't know why I don't want it. I just don't. In an appointment with his general pediatrician, Oscar expertly diverted attention to a different subject and avoided her question about Spinraza. She knew not to press. In an appointment with the local neurologist, I watched Oscar's cheeks flush. "I don't know why I don't want it," he repeated. "I just don't. It's not my deal." He was holding his own in the conversation, but I could detect the subtle change in his face, the way only a parent can. The almost indiscernible tears beginning to gather at the very edges of his eyes. I could see he was at the breaking point. Another doctor in the room cracked a joke, and Oscar laughed so hard he cried. The joke was funny, but not quite that funny. One day, I asked Oscar if he was scared of the needle, if that was why he didn't want Spinraza. He admitted yes, he was afraid of the needle, but that was not all. He did not want to be different. "You know this is not going to make big changes, right? It's not as if you are going to be able to get up and walk." I realized perhaps we had not explained the parameters of what the drug can do. Perhaps he thought this would change his whole identity. "I know that, but being able to raise my hands over my head is a big change." And so I realized he did get it. And he was scared of how this could redefine him, even in what felt like small ways to us. These were not small changes to him. This was his body. This was his world. What if Spinraza could make it possible for Oscar, all nestled up in bed in the middle of the night, hand tucked under his head, to pull his arm out from under the weight of his pillow or cheek, instead of crying out with pain from a body left in one position too long? What if he could catch a hardcover library book with its slippery jacket as it starts to slide off his lap? What if he could pull his own Lego bin off the shelf with little fear of dumping all the tiny pieces on the floor? What if nothing changes? What if we allow a needle again and again into our son's protected spinal fluid, injecting him with a foreign substance? What if we drag him through the trauma of these invasive visits and nothing changes? What if the changes are bigger than we anticipate, and we get hooked on the idea of more, except there would be no more because the drug has limits of what it can do? What if the taste of added independence lights a fire in Oscar and he begins to resent his limitations? Where will we be then? How do any of us know what the next best move is in parenting? How do I know how to provide for my child that which he needs? How do I do what I can to preserve his straight spine, his ability to use his hands, a possibility to strengthen his lungs, while respecting his need to be himself? Allowing him the freedom not to stray from the core of who he is. How do I make sure my son knows without a shadow of a doubt that I love him wholeheartedly, unconditionally for all of who he is? Thank you.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Oscar, thank you for letting her share that. I like it. Sally teaches, are you still teaching in summer, right? Or no?
Every once in a while. I'm busy overseeing all of summer, right?
So every summer, for those of you who may not know, Writers and Books has a writing camp for young people. And Sally is one of the kinds of teachers who can relate to young people and really help them learn how to bring out what they need to say in their own unique ways. I encourage you, if you have children that you love who need a little encouragement to write, bring them out to Summer Write. It's a great program. Thank you again so much for that. So good to hear you read again. You have such a unique voice style, and I can hear your voice when I'm away from you, and I like that. So I was trying to figure out what to say about Reenah, and I realized if I said half of what I need to say about Reenah, we'd be here all night and you'd never hear Reenah. So I'm just going to pull out a couple of things. Understand that this is like a Renaissance woman. She does everything, and everything she does really, really well. And she does things that nobody else does. She invents things to do, and she makes them work. She's definitely a Rochester treasure, and somebody who we should all be thrilled to have in our community and to know. She's the founder and artistic director of the Avenue Blackbox Theatre. She does so many things. I think this kind of says it. For over 15 years, Reenah has been using the power of performance and the spoken word publicly to affect social and political change and create new ways of thinking. Don't we all feel like we desperately need new ways of thinking? Please. She's delivered presentations, residencies, workshops, and professional development in Antigua, Belize, Montreal, Toronto, Calgary, Spain, the Netherlands, Greece, Sicily, and Trinidad. She's a founding member of International Critical Pedagogy and Transformative Leadership Congress. Transformative leadership, think about that. She publishes. She's a member of this writers collective called We All Write, which is, man, a powerhouse of women, I tell you. She's done stuff for Fringe. She has a Poets Cafe incorporating a live studio audience workshop. You can read her bio, and there's probably more that she didn't even give me. But we are so privileged to have her here with us tonight for this short time. I'm going to give her the floor for the rest of what she wants to do. I'll stay here all night if you want. Please give a warm welcome to Reenah.
Thank you, Wanda, and thank you, Sally. And gosh, I was saying to Wanda that coming in this room always, even though it's been a long time since I've actually read here, it does feel like home always to me. Writers and Books is a place where, I spent a lot of time finding my voice as well. Working with young people is something that has always furthered my own voice too. And this is one of the places that I taught faithfully every summer for many years. So it feels great to be here. And thank you so much for sharing your words. And there's so many things we need to talk about over tea. Not you, Oscar, not like talk about you, but so many things that really just have to do with what I talk about often is like just that fierce mothering that, that we have to do, and that, we come to know as the only way to be a parent, right? So I loved it. I loved it, loved it, loved it. All right. So here we go. I'm gonna get water. And I think I'm gonna audio record it and actually play it as a rerun on my show, The Goddess Hour, on Thursdays. So feel free to tune in. I should have thought of this while you were reading too, but we also have this recording, so maybe I can strip the audio from it. Okay, all right, let me do that. All right, so here we go. Because I have new 40-ish eyes, I never know what I can see, so that's why I use the iPad, and then I just keep adjusting until I know that I'm actually able to see. So here we go. So I called this for this Genesee reading series, which I actually did one back in 2005. I looked it up. I was like, gosh, when did I do this before? And I did. And that was so early in my writing. I hated everything I saw in the set that was on my computer. I was like, what? I wrote that? Who did this? Oh God. So hopefully I won't feel the same way about this one. Because I really do love this work, and some of it is quite new. A couple like yours has not seen the light of day, and then a couple haven't seen much. So here we go. I'll begin with, I'm calling this the twists, turns, and transitions of mothering. So here we go. So I'll begin with a piece that was commissioned by Hetty Barnhill for Creative Space Now that we actually mounted as a part of Fringe this past year. And it attempts to explore the worst transition that a mother could probably ever experience, the murder of a child. So I'll just say Black Lives Matter, Black trans lives matter, and we press on. We are the mothers of children watching. We bathe our eyes in saline as shock and grief dry white to red and brown to deep ash. We are the mothers. We've lost sight of how to forgive, so we push our proscriptions for our young down to the slimy bottom and let the acid have its way. Gone, dimpled, smirking wit. Gone, twinkling, glassy wonder. The faces are better there, dissolving in the softness of maternal echo. You were never here. Not in this place where only your death makes sense, where you were never meant to live. This is not where your mother brought you. When the mothers gather here from all walks of life, there is only one sentiment with which we can all agree. We must not let them die. We must not let them die. We must not let them die. Yet, we have to let them go. Any lover knows this dichotomy and despises its honesty, its cold logic, so hard to deny that we can't. Instead, we call their names and evoke half-baked dreams of what could have been. What could have been next? What could have been promised? What could have been survival? We wanted so much more as mothers of children and dreams. We wanted these buds to open again and again on their own, but now the branches are gone. And as for those left clinging to the trunks, for them, we bend our knees into the earth once more, not to plant, but to whisper a prayer through the surface to the waiting roots. We follow them, hungry for answers. Only they know the way. So we round our lips toward the dirt and sigh out a final song to affirm, here. You were here in this place twice before, once when someone had the courage to expel you into existence, cloaked in your sacred, and once again when you closed your eyes around a secret and inhaled your last promise. And we, the mothers, watched your maker and you holding these strained rituals within, but just out of reach. You were here. And so now it is here we say your name. So the next poem is a tribute to the divine feminine spirit of resilience, confidence, and flexibility, originally inspired by me noticing a reflection of my mother glancing back at me as I passed the store window on the street. It's the poem that inspires my signature hashtag, which is Oshun was here. Many people see me post on that. Oshun being the Yoruba or the Santeria spiritual goddess or Orisha, known for her swag, charm, persuasive abilities, and sometimes wrath. Silver Moon Song. Like her, I walk with a sway, a lazy limp deceptively enticing the others, entrapped in only the moment we hear passing. Like hers, my voice is almost never soft, a song for brave ears. We howl and moan, a harmless bite, shadow boxing under the fullness. Like me, she carries the weight of her head easily. The back of her neck is an October branch. No sap, limited flexibility, yet always ready to let the colors pass through. She is teacher. She is lover. She is love. Like her, I walk with a glide, soul barely touching ground, sun rays for toes. We step together in silence. And like we, the others fall in. Our march is a bold ballet learned easily by the young ones. We never stop, like life, heart, breath, pulse. The cycle is a laborious love. She is giver, she is center, she is here. Eternal like the ancients planted in the mud, sliding, shifting, never alone. You'll find her by the river. Honey dipped golden brown, baked softly to silk, caramel pecan topping, butter undertones shining through the summer mud. She's sweet, fudgesicle sweet, cold. You'll find her chill, calming at first, then confusing. Hey girl, where's your keeper? Who keeps up with that long leg stride? Imagined height, an illusion for those who know not their own power. She does. She exudes it. You'll refuse it. Too intense it bites. Your fright is showing, her appeal growing. Hey girl, honey child, where'd you get that smile? 5 miles wide, high tide, low tide, sun god's pride. You, child, live like the wind, blowing in on dragonfly wings, pulling strings. Dance, girl, dance. We never stop, like life, heart, breath, pulse. Yes, a laborious love. She is promise. She is gift. She is here. Okay, so Nova, a star that suddenly becomes thousands of times brighter and then gradually fades to its original intensity. Also my oldest sister's firstborn grandchild. Nova is a superstar. It's as if she knows her role in my eyes, only 8 months old, and already she is in tune to the rhythm of her namesake. Without confession, she has figured out that I have no one to tell that I am afraid I will never become a grandmother. She reaches for me from her mother, my only biological niece, and plays pretend with me. Only she and I know we are playing this game. I sing her name song, which I made up on the fly and will sing to her every time our eyes meet after this moment. Nova, you're a superstar, a superstar, a superstar. Nova, you're a superstar no matter where you are. Where you are. My sister sees only her own pride and Gigi's first grand, smiling up at her daughter's favorite aunt. It's possible she also recalls how often she compared her only daughter and me in moments of frustration or awe during early childhood and adolescent years. She's so independent and headstrong, always being difficult, trying to do things her own way. She would vent in a mix of exasperation and confusion. It was like her way of saying, she can't be my daughter, she must be yours. Similarly, my only offspring's tears and sensitivity used to evoke feelings of a mismatch made in heaven too. I never felt equipped to deal with the Scorpio emotions that might have been more relatable to a fellow water sign. Born with her sun in Cancer, my big sis was definitely not unfamiliar with the inner workings of the emotional wells I tend to avoid like landmines. But, of course, the universe knows best. So we were blessed to have each other to vent to in the moments when we might have thrown our eldest seeds out a bedroom window and hoped for a strong wind, whether to take them away in anger or in love. Makes me wonder what my mother must have thought about how different the two of us were, coming up only 2 years apart and the first and only two born from her short-lived marriage to our father. My sister, in love with perfect Sunday curls and the lace on her knee socks. Me, unable to sit long enough to get my favorite two braids going down, my favorite two braids going back to meet the fold of my turtleneck if I could convince her to join them so they didn't dangle onto either side of my shoulders. I've only ever really heard my dad attempt one joke about his observation of our difference, repeatedly with the same corny chuckle every time. One of my daughters can eat from sunup to sundown and not gain an ounce. The other one just look at food and gain a pound. Worst humor, best heart. This, of course, is a horrible joke in the current times of body positive parenting, but he was really telling the truth. Well, maybe until around the time that Nova was born and my biological clock started a war with my metabolism, resulting in about 20 pounds more than my body had ever known outside of my only full-term pregnancy more than 25 years prior. The difference is he didn't seem to notice, or maybe kept to himself, my disinterest in girl fashion, gender norms, or boys, which would have only delighted him if he had. Come to think of it, I don't recall him ever calling me tomboy, like my mom, aunts, and cousins. And that's remarkable since he's one of the most traditional black men that I know. Old school conservative, rigidly religious, and intellectually curious Aquarius, who must have had some thoughts, but he kept them to himself. Others in my family did not. In 1972, to be born female and prefer balls and cut-off jeans to ruffles or bows means discovering self earlier than most are ready for. It means teasing that leaves scars without even cutting the surface. In the 70s and 80s, there was no popular terms for being non-binary or gender fluid, and only a few for being queer, so free-spirited kids coming of age without a care in the world for fitting into the tradition of gender made their offbeat choices for self-preservation, not politics. Where we learned this, I don't know. It most certainly wasn't from our parents. This is why I know that the universe must indeed be a trickster at heart, and why, though I prayed for a boy, I ended up with a complicated Scorpio, and my sister, she ended up with Nova, and why, for now, she'll just have to share her little bundle of pride with me. Thank you. That's a new, brand new. It's probably part of a memoir that I'll never write. This one is too. 6:30 at grandmother's. It's a short one. When I was a girl, I secretly liked to sit alone in a corner of the family room, away from TV, cousins, rules. It was sometimes meant to be a punishment when grandmother had had enough. I would sit cross-legged with my back against wood paneling, the clang of metal pots, wooden spoons and bowls, the shrill yellow ring of the wall phone in the kitchen. Later, I would see it in her standard message left on my answering machine. Grandmother, 315-483-4319. Grandmother, as if I didn't know. And I would smile, a yellow sunset smile. In my corner, I would gaze out slyly on late day, slipping into early evening through the patio door windows. Tomorrow, I will become a grasshopper and never get caught. This one, What to Do with Pockets of Hope, is one that I read ever so often, just as a reminder of why, I continue to do the work that I do, especially with young people, especially the work in our community that is just fighting to keep young Black and brown bodies safe so that they can, you know, grow into whatever it is that they are going to grow into. It comes from a very tragic night here in Rochester when there was a shooting just outside the Boys and Girls Club, which I actually, I'm separated from the Boys and Girls Club by a high school. My front door is, you know, I would see their front door if it weren't for Wilson High School. So on this particular night, I didn't see what happened, but I heard a lot, you know, and so knowing that something was wrong based on just the voices and the way things were just unfolding in, you know, in front of my house and around my block, you know, I knew something was really, really wrong. And so for many nights after that, people just kept gathering at the Boys and Girls Club. So on my way home, I would stop. On my way out, I would stop. And I saw just young people, mostly around the ages of the young victims, but they were older than high school age, but you know, just in that sort of in-between stage when, you know, they haven't quite figured it out. They're not like into careers yet. They're, you know, these are the ones that probably didn't go to college, or maybe they were taking a class or two at MCC, but during this time, all they could do was grieve. All they could do was come together and just grieve every single day for, it really went on for weeks. And so one of those nights I went home and wrote this poem, What to Do with Pockets of Hope, for Jonah Barley, Raekwon Manigault, Johnny Johnson, and them. Fists stuffed into hoodie, walk with a proud limp. Let your hems drag through sidewalk grime, nostrils flaring at the entrance, a familiar stench. Be at home. No roses here. You have looked thoroughly every morning and every late night in all types of light. No flowers or fragrance. The wrappers on the ground are colorful reminders of dissidence, rainbows of resistance. Step lively, son. Remember back doors and neck laces, no grinning, no skinning. You've seen ghost breath every exhale in winter. You know it well. It whistles, blood chill cuts through January. Know your place. Between curb smut and gutter talk, find your left vein. Feel its pulse as a reminder that you live here. So yes, visit the liquid tombstone often. Leave dandelion root, dried elder leaf, Kalahari devil's claw. Sprinkle a full teaspoon of turmeric powder. Yes, place your half-full Henny bottle gently. This land is your land. Your mourning is yours. Your grief is yours. Your process is yours. Your methods, yours. But remember to carry your weapon concealed. This one is also a newish one. I've never performed it aloud. It was actually, I wrote it for two girls, two young women now. They were my girls once. It's so crazy how many like grown people, you know, any educators out here know what that's like you're kind of like, they're still, you want to believe they're still your kids because you don't want to really think about what it means that they're like grown and have their own families and everything now. But this one also comes with a trigger warning in the description only. So for those who have lost a loved one in or experienced a violent assault, just in the description, this poem is for, oh, actually I should pause in case you need to step out. This poem is for a friend who was murdered on her lunch break by an ex-lover who tossed her out of his moving vehicle after stabbing her multiple times and reducing her to a violent statistic and most common fatality for Black women still today. She was a soft-spoken Leo, beloved daughter and sister, and mother of 2. And this poem is for her. Light for the lovely lioness, for Tracy and the daughters left behind. Let the lioness lie, queen of her own domain. Look how she carries herself in those prints, patterns, adornments that speak to a class above, hidden from some but admired by the ones who knew. Leave her be, she, daughter of valiance, fighting out of a self-imposed shell to love and be loved, to be seen but not touched. Let her be, love the way she desires only she. Let the lioness lie, still in fearless wonder, she, kin to kindness, genuine in spirit, laughing with the clouds, dancing with the daughters, the friends, the siblings, bending in to love personified. Lady Lion, you are loved. That's for Tracy. Very sweet. For our final twist, turn, and transition of the year, the winter solstice that will be upon us in less than a month. And here we have a poem for winter souls. Restless solstice, seek solace by pressing through the dark gravity, the grief, finding refuge in naked rants, lifting you from your ignorant oblivion, if only for a moment of awe. Yes, this is a reflective space. It is here we usher brilliant rage to rest for a moment, rejuvenate, replenish. These souls will reign supreme. Thank you very much.
Wow. I said they were powerhouses, and I did not lie, did I? I always am being so full I can hardly speak because it's just triggering in a good way those things in my own life and my own stuff. And so I feel like I have stuff to work on now when I go home. And so I will take a lot of what you have shared with us with me when I go. And who knows where it will turn up later. You've planted your little seeds here today. So thank you very much for coming out. I'm so thrilled to see all of you in the audience. It took a while for you to file into the room, and I thought, how can there be nobody in the audience for these 2 people? And you all came at once, and it was just lovely. So we do have some cookies and drinks. Please linger for a few moments and speak to Sally and Reenah and let them know how this has affected you or what you'll take from it. And say hi to Oscar and his friends. What happened to your friends? Okay. Don't forget the friends. And come back in second Tuesday of December. We have a completely different feel. James Longenbach, who's a professor of poetry at University of Rochester, and his wife, the novelist Joanna Scott, will be here. And you don't want to miss that one either. We are so blessed. We have so many great writers in this community. Some of whom are here tonight. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop talking and let you talk to the people and eat.
Thank you.